Young Americans are working hard, going to school, have a side hustle, and are still stuck today. Basic life milestones are becoming unreachable for the younger generation of Americans. Buying a car, buying a home, investing, saving, all those things are becoming rare today. And this is not just about being bad with money or spending too much on things you shouldn't be buying. A lot of young people are feeling like they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and still falling behind. Young Americans are struggling because they are dealing with high costs, debt, inflation, and a lack of ownership in assets. The problem is a lot bigger than bad budgeting. Personal choices with your money matter, but they do not explain the entire context of the situation. Rent, groceries, insurance, cars, tuition eat up your income very quickly, and a lot of young Americans are involved with a lot of these things early on. Even young, responsible people that make a good income feel broke because the cost of living is so high. The problem is right now is the economy is rewarding people who already own assets. We're seeing a stage of higher inflation than we normally do, and this is making people that own assets a lot more money, while young Americans who don't own anything are just falling even further behind. Gen Z is entering adulthood with a lot more debt than earlier generations have. Debt makes it harder to save, invest, move out of your parents' house, or start a business or do anything like that. Debt causes young people to start the race already behind instead of starting from zero. That's why it's so important that you get out of debt as quickly as you can when you're very young. Inflation is eating most people's paychecks away completely. Prices have gone way up very quickly in the last few years for food, rent, insurance, utilities, transportation, pretty much everything. Even when salaries rise, people may not feel richer because their expenses are rising too. So on paper, wages may be going up, but the purchasing power does not always feel like your life is improving. I've seen some mixed reports. Some are saying that wages are beating inflation, but some say they're not. So we'll just say that they're going exactly the same for now for the sake of the argument. So getting your standard raise, 3% or something like that, you're actually just keeping up with inflation at this point. And I think a lot of young people don't really care if their salary increase, if their rents and groceries and insurance are getting increased as well. The big problem I talked about earlier is asset inequality. A lot of older, richer people have a ton of assets that are making them a bunch of money, and that's why they might not feel the economy struggles that the younger Americans are feeling as much. And assets that they own include retirement accounts, houses, stocks, real estate, anything like that. And asset inequality in America is becoming a very large issue, especially in the last few years. A lot of the wealthier people are getting significantly wealthier, while the middle class are struggling even more than they were. And a lot of young Americans aren't just behind on income, they're behind on the ownership aspect. Owners benefit when stocks go up, housing prices go up, and non-owners feel that cost in their own lives because they're the ones renting or they're the ones buying. A landlord probably benefits from raising rent, but the renter does not. A homeowner may be able to gain equity while the renter also is not. They're just paying the equity for somebody else. And a lot of people like to talk about the divide between rich people and poor people. It's really between owners and non-owners. And that's why it's so important for young Americans to become owners as quickly as they can. And I know that might feel impossible, but in previous generations, the most important time in your life was maybe your 30s or your 40s, where you really had your high income years. You got a house and you really were able to put a bunch of money in for retirement. Now you have to be 18 to 25, and that's what you have to be doing to be able to afford anything by the time you're 40. And I think that's the big culture shift with the younger generation in America. If you're 25 and you have nothing in retirement, or 30 and nothing in retirement, you're way behind at the game. Young Americans are starting way behind now compared to older generations. Homes are more expensive, so you need more time to save. So you have to start younger. Rent is so high now, it's taking all the money that you could be saving or investing to also get ahead. The younger generation now is starting out with a ton of student loan debt, credit card debt, and they may delay financial moves to get out of that situation. Young people are trying to build wealth after paying for survival first, which makes sense, obviously. But a lot of the times, this survival, the bills that they have are just a result of unnecessary actions or things they could have helped minimize earlier in their life when they were teenagers, maybe. And that's why it's so important that everybody is financially literate now these days. The game is completely changed. Now you have to be 20 with a understanding of what you want and what you need to do to get those goals. You can't just wake up at 30 anymore and decide you want to, buy a house. You miss 10 years of saving, and it's so expensive now that you might not be able to. So how can young Americans actually get ahead? Following a basic financial plan is the first step. Starting off with an emergency fund, investing some of your paycheck, saving some of your paycheck, getting out of debt as quickly as you can. These are all things that you have to do as early as possible. Another useful thing that people can do is create something of value. If you're just going to work and coming out, there might be other things you can do, and creating value can be in a lot of different ways. So I won't get into them in this video, but that is something that a lot of people need to do. If you ever want to be able to, have a nice house, have a family and things like that, that's just the way it is now with the economy and the prices of everything. Skills are some of the first assets young people can build. If you're 22, you can't probably buy a house right now, but you can start building skills to make more money and hopefully be able to buy a house later in the future. One thing I think that puts a lot of young people down is the consumer trap, spending a lot of money on things that don't matter. Social media has ruined any thought of, what you should be doing with your money. People are just talking about doing absolutely ridiculous things with their money or going to absolutely ridiculous places, or so hard to stay disciplined financially for young people because of the social media aspect. I obviously am a young American, and these things are quite disheartening in my life as well, and I think a lot of people would agree it's very difficult now to do what your parents did or your grandparents did. It's important to remember, though, you cannot control inflation, housing prices, the economy, but you can understand the game earlier, get more educated earlier, and be able to apply that to your life financially to be better off. Ownership is the key difference between just surviving and building. Young Americans can't get ahead if they just earn and spend. The way forward is to use your income to get ownership. And yeah, that's just my, opinion on this topic. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment. Thanks.